welcome to Pandora's Box. Give it to us, Drew. Give it to us. Nice. Welcome to Pandora's Box, everyone. We're going to be using lots of music, incorporating lots of music into today's show. Because we've got this really cool little keyboard that I bought my daughter in the studio. And it's just so much fun to play with, really, yeah. So I know it's funny, isn't it? So we're going to be incorporating that. So whenever Drew feels like it, randomly, at different parts of the show, he's just going to sporadically explode into music. So we'll all have to watch out for that. And we'll just take it as it comes. Even if it means we just have to, just in the middle of a conversation, we're just going to have to cut the conversation a second so that Drew can express himself, and then we'll get back to whatever we're talking about, all right? Maybe a certain topic will be making Drew feel a certain way, and he can what's the word I'm looking for? He can
express that.
He can express that. Yes, in musical form, which is one of the ultimate expressions, music and art. So, don't be afraid, Drew, to just take it away, all right, whenever you feel like it. But welcome to Pandora's Box, everyone. Thanks for joining us yet again. You may be listening to us on AW Radio. You might also be listening to us on the YouTubes or the Spotifys or wherever else you can listen to podcasts. Whichever way you listen to us, we appreciate every single one of yours, and we'd appreciate you following us on all of our various platforms. And if you remember to give us a like and a share and a subscribe, you will forever be a friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod.
A friend of the pod. I'm just going to randomly just kick it off with a quickfire fact today. This guy obviously. I mean, this is a touchy subject for me. A sore subject because I also am a bearded man. But there was a man in Massachusetts called Joseph Palmer in 1830 that was attacked for having a beard.
What?
He was actually imprisoned for defending himself as well. So he fought off his attackers, but was imprisoned for it. He died in 1873, but by that time, beards were very fashionable and lots of men had beards. So on his tombstone, they put, persecuted for wearing the beard. So, shout out to Joseph Palmer. Perplexed looks all around for that quick fire.
I don't like it and I won't have it.
I don't like it and I won't have it. Imagine being attacked. Although say that, Drew. You once persecuted a man for having a beard and a pub, didn't you?
I did, didn't I?
Drew
was very drunk.
Drew went full Drennan once. When Drew gets past, I'd say 3 pints, he turns Scottish, and he also becomes a lot more aggro than his normal self. Usually Drew's a fun, loving guy. Even has little hints of maybe even hippiness in his personality. Loving, spiritual, that sort of stuff.
Love, not war.
But 3 pints in, Angry Angus, you could call him, Angry Angus. And he once in a pub, you were like, "Oh, you can get a beard."
Yeah.
Wasn't it a pub, or was it the kebab shop?
It was in the fountain.
I thought it was the fountain.
Guy was sitting down, and I was trying to say something to the guy, and he just was completely ignoring me. And I was going, "Oi, beard!" He had a beard, and I was just calling him beard. Yeah. And Josh and that was laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran away. I ran away from the pub that night, and they just didn't know where I'd gone. Yeah, I just.
Can you remember why you ran away? Just a flight of fancy.
Yeah, when I get really drunk, that's another thing
that
I do. I just go. I'm just off. I'm just off.
Ran
see you
so
later.
far away.
I think I was sick in the toilet, and then I ran.
It's just so funny that you were like, I need to be sick. Oh, right, well, there's only one thing naturally to do now, and that's just sprint off.
Run away.
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe it was Joseph Palmer, the spirit of Joseph Palmer you saw in the fountain that night. You never know.
Persecuted for beards. Whatever next.
Yeah, weird, isn't it? Weird. There was a man called Robert Kearns who invented intermittent windshield wipers. Obviously a common feature on cars today. He tried to sell his idea to the auto industry, but was turned away. Shortly afterwards, they began showing up on new cars, so he sued the manufacturers from the industry and won millions of dollars in a settlement.
Good
man.
Good on you, man.
So he showed them the technology and then
Yeah,
they
tried to
just
sell it
started
to them
using
and they were like, no, we're not going to give you any money for your thing, but then just like started using it on the cars anyway. Cheeky that, isn't it? Cheeky that. Well, he got millions of dollars anyway,
Yeah, I
so
suppose.
it's all
Imagine
good,
how
isn't
much he'd have now, though.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, in the USSR was expected to win the final of the 1957 Ice Hockey World Championships held in Moscow, but surprisingly lost to Sweden. The organisers didn't even have the Swedish national anthem ready for the medal ceremony, so the Swedish players sang an old Viking drinking song and broadcast it over the PA system instead. That's quite cool, isn't it?
That is the way
Just
to
imagine
do
them
it.
all just drinking beer, just like
And
chanting some...
knowing all
Yeah.
that. What song do we all know?
Yeah, some weird old Swedish
I'd
chants.
love to go to Scandi. Sam's in
me too.
Scandi at the moment. Isn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah, my brother is, yeah.
He messaged me and I was just like so jealous. I really want to go over there and check it out.
That's
yeah.
a bit random that he just messaged you.
Yeah, it was about shows to get some stuff for the show.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, and he just said he was. Is it Sweden?
Yeah, he's in Sweden. Yeah, Sweden.
And I was just like, that would be so cool to like actually go and visit some.
Yeah, I really want to go to Norway.
Yeah.
I remember thinking it was so cool. The last time I was in the Isle of Man, there's in the Manx Museum in Peel. There's like a big Viking longship called Odin's Raven in there, which is also quite funny because that's like what Ron Burgundy. Well, there's like this bit in Anchorman where like Ron Burgundy. I can't remember even what happens, but it's like something like happens. It's like either like someone's insulted him or something like that, and he just goes, Odin's Raven. And it's just like a really just funny random bit of the movie. But yeah, the ship's called Odin's Raven, and a combined fleet of like Norwegian and Manx sailors sailed in like honour of the Manx and Norwegian ancestors that obviously used to do things like this like fairly regularly. They sailed on the Viking longboat all the way from Peel in the Isle of Man to I think it was either Trondheim or Lofoten in Norway.
Wow.
And they went all the way, like all around Scotland and then all the way in a Viking longship.
Not the Raven's Eye.
No, the Ravens, in
Odin's Raven.
In Odin's Raven, they did.
Whoa.
And then, so cool. I
can't believe that it's
That's
still
really cool.
like.
I think they did it in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, they built the ship.
Oh,
it wasn't like an old original.
Oh, I thought they
but
took Odin's Raven.
No, so it was based. They think it was a ship. So there was like a ship that was dug up in the Isle of Man. It was obviously the wreck of a ship, and then they built a replica.
Oh,
so they built like an exact replica, but then sailed that to Norway.
Nice.
Yeah.
So cool. I wonder how many like replicas there are now of like say like Viking longships and stuff, because they're so amazing, the designs of them and stuff, aren't they? Like
I tell you what, though. I mean, anybody that's obviously, I know this is going to sound a funny thing to use as your historical knowledge, but obviously a lot of Viking, like, you know, from the program Vikings, obviously there's a lot of it which isn't 100% historically accurate, but the bare bones are, and one of the things that obviously are true is when you see the dangers of the voyage, like sailing from like Norway to you know, like the northeast coast of England or Scotland wouldn't have been like an easy task. And as you see in a lot of the shows, like a lot of ships are like lost. If there's like a fat storm on the North Sea, not only are the waters freezing, but it's like it would be like stuck in like a freezing cold like washing machine. Like even the best swimmers on the planet would not stand a chance at surviving. Do you know what I mean?
And it's crazy because you don't get like waves that are like well, not that I've seen in England anyway, that are absolutely insanely huge, but they're choppy. Like, it's so choppy, innit? It's like so crazy, like. Yeah,
and as I said, the water's freezing cold. It's just so So if like, and obviously they can't predict if you're gonna get caught in a storm. You would just have to like pray to Odin. Do you know what I mean? So like sometimes they're probably pretty fair sailing, and maybe all the ships would make it over. Other times, maybe not even half would, maybe not even like a quarter. You see that, don't you? In like, I think there's a couple of episodes in some of those sort of shows. I don't, you know, whether it's Vikings or Last Kingdom or whatever. And you see like, if you get caught in a storm on the North Sea, then like the majority of your fleet is going to sink. Yeah. And I know it happened as well. There was a time during, I think it was during Elizabeth I's reign in England, where Spain decided they were going to invade England, and they built like this massive Spanish armada. and they sailed up to England, but it just so happened they got caught in a storm, and like something ridiculous, like 75% of the Spanish fleet just got like sunk to the depths, and the rest just went home. So they were just like, well, there's no point because we just don't have enough people now.
I think I've heard of that story. Yeah. That's crazy, isn't it?
That is mad. And then at the time, Elizabeth I and the English in general used it as, because obviously back in those days people were still like very, very religious. They saw it as like this massive sign that God was on their side, like God was on the side of the English.
God saving the Queen, some could say.
Yeah, exactly. God save the Queen. I mean it, man.
I've got a question, which is slightly off topic, but kind of on topic.
Yeah.
Which is better out of Vikings and Last Kingdom? Because I want to watch one, I don't know which one to watch.
I'd say watch both of them, man.
Yeah,
you won't be disappointed.
I would definitely say watch both of them. They're amazing.
Different in their own ways.
I would say that the difference between Last Kingdom and...
Last Kingdom's more historically accurate, isn't it? Is it not?
Maybe a bit. I mean, I don't think either of them are particularly known for their massive accuracy. In terms of like necessarily like... The basics are accurate enough. Obviously, it's like fiction, but... You know, the characters are based on real historical people. The time periods are right. The things that aren't so accurate are things like, it's not 100% accurate, say, like what they would have like worn and stuff like that. Yeah. But I mean, the majority of it is pretty accurate. I think at the end of the day, you can learn history from it. Yeah. It's not like I think it's really good to know, like, you know. So for example, King Egbert in Vikings, he really was. Let me think. He really was Alfred the Great's grandfather, I think he was. Yeah, so he was, so he was Alfred's grandfather. And things like you can find out things like that from.
I remember watching them. That I always thought that Last Kingdom was felt like it was more like realistic to like the time and
there
stuff.
Was
and,
an there was an Uhtred of Bebbanburg.
Yeah. And even just like the way that it was like filmed and everything, it almost like took you more into like that time and like what it would have been like. Say like. I always thought Vikings seemed a little bit more like Hollywooded up than like the production and stuff. It might have just even been the production. That was, but like that the vibe of it. But then there's still like kind of weird magically things that happen with Last Kingdom as well. But there's more of that in Vikings, isn't there?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So is Last Kingdom the one you prefer out of the two then?
I don't know, man.
I think for me, I would say I like it a little bit more on the whole. But I'd say. I mean, if you take like the best episode of the Vikings and you take like the best episode of the Last Kingdom, there's not really much in it. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. The one thing I would say is Vikings started really strong and it never got bad, but I would say it
definitely maybe got a little bit towards the end.
Yeah. Whereas I say the Last Kingdom is opposite. It started off okay. And it's almost like just got better and better and better and better. So it's like, in that regard, I think people would probably agree that you'd rather go that way. Yeah. Cool. I'd rather start off pretty good and end up awesome than start awesome and end up pretty good. Do you know what I mean? Because there's that feeling of advancement. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
That's definitely what I felt like with both of them.
But still, saying that, I mean, the last season of Vikings, obviously I don't want to give spoilers, so I won't say anything specific, but the whole story of Bjorn and Lagertha and everything, and Ubba, amazing, amazing. Still, I was still like loving it, watching it. Yeah, like all of Ubba's adventures over the seas, and like just the whole culmination of like seeing Bjorn grow up and then his story. Yeah, like how that ends, and Lagertha, seeing her
even going over to the Med and everything as well.
I forgot about that. That's actually hilarious. Yeah. Some of those bits. Yeah, they go across because they go. Yeah, is it? I think don't they go? I can't remember exactly where it is they end up. Do they end up in the Middle East?
Yeah, Middle East or something. Yeah,
because it's obviously it's like mental over there, isn't it? It's like very different to their normal way of life, isn't it? That's really cool though. But yeah, I'd say really, man, it's just coin toss it. I would literally just toss a coin. And then see which one.
And then still watch the other one.
Yeah, and then just toss a coin and see which one to watch first, because really it's like and also
see both of them.
And I could almost guarantee as well that by the time you have finished watching whichever one you watch first, whichever one you finish watching, you'll be so in that mindset of wanting more of it. You'll be really happy there's a whole other series which is like almost the same but with just different characters. It's cool as well because it's like The Last Kingdom is set like about 50 years after the events of the Vikings. So it's almost like...
Oh, is it?
You could almost like see it as a sequel.
Yeah.
Do you remember... Well, in that sense, maybe it'd be cool to watch the Vikings and then watch like... what happens after that.
I think that's the way I did it. I think I watched Vikings first, then I watched Last Kingdom, but just because of when they come out, maybe even or something.
Yeah, Vikings started before Last Kingdom. Yeah. I think by the time the Last Kingdom started, there'd been like 3 seasons of Vikings. Or...
When's the next season of Witcher?
Oh, I guess like Christmas time, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
That would be. I can't wait.
But the last couple of ones have been brought out about Christmas time, haven't they? But yeah, I love that. I love Witcher as well. But yeah, because if you remember, sorry, just going back a minute before we go on to Witcher, like. If you remember, Drew, in season 1 of The Last Kingdom, Ubba is like one of the most, if not the most feared Viking in the lands, but he's clearly probably about 40, 50 by that stage. Whereas even by the end of Vikings, Ubba's probably like 25, would you say? So it's like...
Oh, that's the Ubba.
It's the same character.
Oh,
They're both Ragnar Lothbrok's son.
Ah,
you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, they look a bit different because it's different actors portraying them, obviously. But because it's different productions and all that. But yeah, it's the same. It's the same person historically. And obviously, in The Last Kingdom, it starts off the king is Alfred the Great. Well, as we said, we know that Alfred the Great was the grandson of King Egbert, who's like the main Saxon king in the Vikings. Like when Ragnar goes over to England. Obviously, at the time, there was a king of Mercia, of Wessex, and of Northumbria. So you see, King Aela is the king of Northumbria, Egbert is the king of Wessex, and in this regard, it is all historical because that is correct. Obviously, Wessex ended up basically being like the dominant kingdom, which is quite funny in a way because for a majority of history before that, I would say Mercia was probably the most dominant kingdom. But then, it was the descendants of the House of Wessex that ended up essentially being the king of the whole of England. So Alfred's grandson was Ethelstan, and he became like the first proper king of England. But it's quite cool as well because obviously one thing I like about both of the shows, they add in fictional stuff that almost... it's fictional, but it almost like tries to almost like explain why something actually historical happened. So it's like, that both Egbert and Ragnar like loved Ethelstan the monk. And it's almost like, and do you remember that Ethelstan got, oh man, I'm going spoilers now. I said I wasn't going to have any spoilers. But basically, Ethelstan is Alfred's grandson, isn't he? Well, I think it's almost like supposed to say that like Athelstan was named after Athelstan the monk.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it's cool because obviously that's not actual history.
No.
That's like something that happened because it's
so
also
was
Judith
Athelstan the monk like a fake character? Like
I think so. Yeah, I think it's just purely fictional. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously the Vikings really raided Lindisfarne, but the idea that there was like,
obsessed with a monk called Athelstan.
the idea that like they sort of took this monk and he sort of became part of their crew. I think that's, as far as I know, that's like purely fictional. I've never heard that in any like.
I'd love to see
text.
like a season as well. I don't know if this has been done or not.
Yeah.
But like where of like the first steps of like Rome coming over to England and like fight. Was it Bathsheba or not Bathsheba? There was a woman queen of like Boudica, that's it.
Yeah.
And like imagine like seeing like a real amazing series where, because she was apparently like proper feared, wasn't she? And just like,
yeah, I'm trying to remember what emperor was the first one that went to Britain, because I know that the Romans were actually really terrified of Britain for a long time. They had a lot of mythology about Britain, and they thought that the English Channel was basically this like magical, like almost like part of the ocean that was almost like really hard to cross, because they thought that the gods basically like were in control of that region, but they would almost like doom anybody that tried to cross. And they had weird I don't know where it came from. But they had all this mythology about Britain, that in Britain there were these like terrifying monsters and beasts and everything. So even though the Roman Empire had like already pretty much just kicked all of Europe's ass, they were quite scared and like really superstitious to come to England. And I can't remember what the first emperor was that he came here, but I know he did cross the Channel, and they did do, do some business, but then they didn't settle there, and then I think it was Julius Caesar that ended up settling there. So Julius Caesar came over, and that's when he established like the lands, and then it was Emperor Hadrian obviously that built Hadrian's Wall, and that kept out the northern tribes. So Hadrian's Wall is like northern England, isn't it? A lot of people think well, I think that some people think this, so they think it's like the Scottish border, but it's not. It would have it's actually technically northern England, I think, Hadrian's Wall. I'm pretty sure.
You would imagine the success of Vikings and Last Kingdom, and of course the Northmen recently in cinema. You imagine that almost, I'm sure there would have been historical series and films before, but obviously these series and that film have been so successful. You would imagine it really will pave the way for more stuff to come like that in the future.
Because that is that's one of the other dominant moments of fascinating. Of
British history.
Yeah. That must have been crazy, because I remember hearing these stories about Boudica and the fact that
Iceni tribe, I think Boudica was the head of. So there was all these different tribes. So
and her husband in that was all killed or something.
I think it was her father.
Yeah.
Her father was, I think her father was a man named King Oswald. And I think that they were killed by the Romans, and then she was just incensed and went mental. Yeah.
And was this crazy good warrior and stuff.
Yeah, but she managed to win a lot of battles. Yeah. And she's to this day is one of Britain's probably best ever warriors and leaders, which is pretty cool. I know that there's various statues of Boudica and stuff, which is so there should be.
Yeah, and the druidic history of all that time and that as well, and how everything was just passed down verbally and in stories and everything. But was it you that told me that the druids had such power in that in that time in that region that they could literally walk out onto a battlefield and just be stop, and everyone would stop?
Yeah, so I think there's quite a lot of people nowadays that are interested in druidic paganism. So I think a lot of people can't really differentiate between the different pantheons of paganism. So I think some people just think that paganism's paganism, but obviously there's the Greek pantheon, which is Zeus and Hera and Athena and all that, and then you've got the Norse pantheon, which is Thor and Odin and Freyr and all them lot. Yeah, Balder and and Loki.
Loki, that's enough Loki.
And then you've got the Druidic pantheon, which is sometimes we play this artist called Down the Bard. So all he writes about is the Druidic pantheon. So you've got gods and goddesses. You've got Brigid and Morrigan and all of those ones. So that's Druidic paganism. So the Iceni tribe, which would have been Boudica's tribe, and all the tribes in what we now know as Britain, when the Romans came across, we wouldn't have been obviously anywhere near a united country. It would have been lots of different tribes of various powers, but they would have all been druidic. They would have been the religion of the land, whether you were South England, North Scotland, whatever, and Wales obviously, and I'm pretty sure in Ireland as well. But so that would have been druidic paganism. So you'd have had the druids, and they were the most sort of sacred members of society, and they were so powerful that even if there was a massive battle going on, if they could walk into the middle of a battle and just go stop, and everyone would just stop what they were doing.
That's cool.
That is mad, isn't it? Cool. That's really cool, because they were just completely sacred, and obviously it's all those societies that would have built things like Stonehenge, any of these things like that. A lot of the things I'm pretty sure obviously there are other sacred sites as well, like Avebury, Avebury stone circles and stuff like that. Other various little pictures, and
it makes me want to know the secrets of the mystery traditions that would have been passed down, but only to the highest orders of those ranks of druids and stuff. Imagine what they knew,
especially because they were illiterate. They couldn't write. All those ancient tribes,
and I think they also chose not to. This guy was describing it, and he was saying that when things got passed down in such a in a way like that, where it wasn't written down, but you had to be the head of an order to actually get this information. It was such a sacred thing, and it was such a protected.
You had to give it to only trusted people.
Yeah, because it was so small, the amount of people, and it was so revered. It got passed down for ages.
Yeah.
Because the tradition, but as soon as that was stopped, as soon as that was cut, it's gone.
Yeah.
You've got 1 point of knowledge to all of that stuff, or it's a very. it's done through an order. And I think that's just so interesting. Like it is, and imagine, is there anything in the world now that has
KFC secret formula?
Yeah,
the Colonel's secret recipe.
That's it. And it's like I said about that Da Vinci one that was in Egypt, and it got like disbanded like when all the Nazis went over. And, but that was an actual thing that he was a part of and stuff. And it's like, I wonder how many there are around in the world still now that hold this secret knowledge that's been passed down for generations.
Apparently as well, like when the Romans first came over, apparently all of the tribes of Britain were like naked. So we just went around like completely starkers.
What, in this cold?
What, just because there was the temperature allowed it to?
No. It wasn't anything to do with temperature. Obviously, it would have been
more hardy.
If anything, I mean, I don't know if this is the case. I imagine for some reason it would have been maybe a bit colder than it is today. But
I always thought so.
But they were just hardy people, and they were just naked. I think they would have had the ability to make clothes if they wanted to, but it was almost just part of their culture. Like they weren't bothered, so they were all naked. But the one thing they did do, there are. You can obviously get sort of like natural paints from like different flowers and stuff. So they used to. I can't remember what flower it is. You can look it up. Just maybe even like if one of us look up like what
ancient body paint.
What flowers did the ancient Britons use as dye? But what they used to do is they'd be naked, but they would cover themselves in like a blue flowers paint. And they would essentially almost like, obviously they weren't permanent tattoos, but they would almost like cover themselves daily in this like blue, almost like tribal stuff from like head to toe. And they would also use, I can't remember exactly what it was, but they would essentially make like a gel, like a hair gel out of like a certain substance. I don't know if it was I think it was also from some sort of plant. And they would spike their hair up, so it would be like crazy. So they would all have like. So when the Romans were like battling them, and they were like very savage tribal people, so they'd be like there with their like with their weapons, with their swords and their spears and their axes and stuff, but they would be like completely naked, covered in blue dye with like spikes like everywhere. Yeah,
almost looking a bit alien.
Yeah, but I can imagine it was quite a ferocious sight,
What time period sort?
Well, so that? Like over 2,000 years, like so around like 2,000 years ago, around the same sort of time that they say that like Christ was alive, you know.
Cool.
Because you had the Roman occupation of Britain, and the Romans pulled out around sort of roughly around 500. This is when the Anglo-Saxons came in, and that's obviously what's given us our name to this day. So like Anglo-Saxon, Angles, Anglo-land, England, and also that's also sort of explains why, say, there's always been a bit of a rivalry between like the Scottish and the Welsh and the Irish against sort of like the English, not necessarily in a unified way. It's not. I mean, it's not like they're like a team and England's a team, but like they all individually have their gripes. I guess it's because to this day, they almost still see the English as almost like invaders, because, as I said, the Angles, they're not all ancient Britain people, They're people from a foreign land. So like as far as like the Welsh and the Scottish would see it, they think that all of Britain should almost like be theirs.
Whoa.
Whereas the English are almost like foreigners. Like they came to this land. So were they
basically the only ones that survived it when the Angles came because they were so out of the way?
Well, yeah, from like the Roman times as well. So there are lots of Roman forts in Wales. Obviously, the Romans never fully managed to like sort of conquer and occupy Scotland.
As soon the further north they went, the harder it was, obviously.
Yeah, but then obviously, the Romans pulled out. The Anglo-Saxons came in, and there's evidence that the Anglo-Saxons were already trying to invade before the Romans left, because there's Roman castles fortified all across the east coast of England. And what's on across the east coast of England? Across the sea, there's Denmark, and there's North Germany, and there's Norway, and like a little bit lower, you've got the Netherlands. Like the Netherlands is like a stone throw from England, really. You look on a map, you see how close France and the Netherlands are to England. It's like nothing, really. You know what I mean? It's like, what is it, like 30 miles or something like that?
Really?
Something like that, isn't it? Like the closest point.
That is pretty much.
I'm just trying to think. I don't know, that's obviously not 100% accurate, but I swear like at the most narrow point it's like 30 miles from like England to France, or England to the Netherlands, But
the blue dye is Isatis tinctoria.
So what flower is that?
It's they also called it woad, like
that's it, woad,
and it's from the mustard family of plants.
Oh, the mustard?
Yeah.
Oh, I like mustard.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was a blue dye.
Yeah, so that's the blue dye.
Right. So that's interesting that they said it's from the mustard family, because obviously mustard is yellow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I might just imagine I'm just going to cover myself in English mustard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's from the mustard
Spicy.
family of plants, but so I guess
it's a related, but obviously it's not necessarily the same. Like,
Next week, if we come in all naked, but painted weird colours and like really,
imagine
really
my hair,
sharp hair.
Imagine how long my hair is. It would be like up to like here.
That's
but
all
just
camera,
yellow.
man. That's how big it
I
is.
look like a Super Saiyan.
Yeah, man.
Because it'd be yellow. That'd be so cool. Just loads of dried mustard. Just smell like a ham and mustard sandwich.
Imagine someone came in and we're doing the podcast. And we were
just
like,
naked.
Like
just got your balls out, but just with like
going Super
Saiyan hair, but just naked.
We got to get some, man.
Yeah, it would be cool, man.
Yeah, so from the UK to I was going to say South France,
right?
20 miles at the shortest point.
Oh, is it only 20 miles? See, that's nothing.
That's crazy. I saw a cool post actually this morning.
Yeah,
and I was looking at it and I was like, that blew my mind. It was the fact that to drive to London to Moscow, I think it was Moscow.
From London to Moscow, yeah.
Is shorter distance to go from one side of Australia to the other. Because Australia is like that big.
Yeah, Australia's obviously one of the biggest countries.
Yeah. I feel like for some reason I just didn't realise it was
appreciate
that big.
it.
Like to go from London to Moscow, in my head that seems like a further distance, but it's only like 1,700 miles or something.
I think. Yeah.
And then from one side of Australia to the other, it's like over 2,000.
Was that from like sort of like west to east or?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting about Australia as well, it's like one of the only developed countries that has basically like no settlements inland. Obviously, you think of like Britain, it's like regardless of where you go, whether it's Midlands, like coastal, whatever, it's just towns and cities everywhere and villages. Whereas obviously in Australia, all of their cities are all on the coast, aren't they?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you look at obviously like a map of Australia, you're like all Sydney and whatever. Like,
so inland, is there any settlements? Like there's none at all. Like
I don't
right
think so.
Very
Nothing bigger,
wilderness, isn't it?
Nothing. It's, I think it's even classified as a desert.
Too hot,
I imagine
mate.
there'd be stuff like near Ayers Rock and stuff, like the touristy places.
There are roads like going
Yeah.
through the middle, but they're considered quite dangerous. So like I know that there's like signposts in Australia that on the roads that it says things like it's like check your fuel, make sure you've got water, because there's loads of tales of people that have like broken down in like the middle of Australia and you're hundreds and hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement, like human settlement, and it's like, if you fucking break down, right, and the nearest petrol station's 300 miles away and you've got no water and it's freaking 42 degrees outside, what are you going to do?
You are toast.
You are literally going to die. You're literally going to die.
Yeah.
You can't make it to civilization in time to drink water and there's no water around natural water to drink because it's like a desert. It's like an arid desert. You'd have to freaking like kill a kangaroo and drink its blood to survive.
It's crazy like how just the heat as well like makes you trip out. Like you hear stories of people that get like sunstroke and then they like strip off all their clothes and they're just and like still just walking out into the desert, but they just want to strip it off even more because they're super hot, and then we'll just get
sunburn,
start just proper hallucinating and everything. It's like
essentially just turn into bacon.
Would you rather die in like a hot climate or a cold climate, like due to exposure?
They would both be horrible, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I'd probably say I mean, it's horrible to be like horribly cold, but you hear about I mean, I suppose it's the same with like getting hot and tripping out, and then all of a sudden you're just like tripping. But like apparently you hear like in the cold, like once it really
like the delirium
sets in,
of feeling
and then you
like
just
you're
get
hot.
like and like you can just completely strip off like in the freezing, and then like and apparently it's like this warm, glowing, beautiful feeling all throughout your body and that.
That's weird. Yeah, I've heard that. There's some people that have been found like frozen to death and they've stripped off. So they were wearing like full snow gear.
Yeah, it's like your body almost like you get confused, and
Yeah,
it's like you feel
I think like
hot.
once your nerve endings have got past a certain point of like almost being
just completely numb.
Yeah, your body almost like thinks you're hot for some reason, so you strip off, even though you're like in like minus 20 degrees.
Yeah,
crazy, man. I think it depends as well. Like, if say in the heat environment, would you have to be out in the sun? Because if I had to be out actually in the sun, then I would definitely rather die of cold because you'd essentially burn to death. Yeah. Oh man,
burning and blistering to death. No, thank you.
I mean, I think most people have probably had like at least pretty bad sunburn in their life, and it's not nice.
No.
So imagine that like times 10 to the point where you're dying and it's all
and
over
like,
you.
and the worst bit is there would be
burning to
nowhere to go. Like normally, if you're burning, you can get
like
a bit of shade.
Yeah,
but like
desert,
if you're in a desert where there's nowhere to go and you're just walking out and it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah,
and I almost think with the cold, like you go numb. But but with the heat, like I can't imagine you really getting numb.
I definitely
burn.
Yeah, I definitely.
I feel like the cold would get you quicker too. I feel like the hot might be painful for
I think
longer.
it would be more painful, and I think it would almost just be more before it even became painful. I think it would be more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know when you're like super dehydrated and you get a bit of a headache and everything, and like you just feel super lethargic, and then it's not
I can't remember the last time I was like proper cold because I haven't like let myself be cold, but I do have some memories of like just like being outside with just a t-shirt or whatever, and literally like in the freezing cold, and it is horrible. The worst one I ever experienced was in that Fairfield.
I knew you were gonna say that.
We all slept in the Fairfield that night.
Mate, I was bloody cold.
We didn't have any blankets or nothing. It was like in the middle of winter, like just like
it was like
in a field.
-4.
That's a bad move.
We just all got a little bit drunk at like 15 or something, and just stayed in the Fairfield all night. And it was like I think it was like it was like January, and it was like -4 that night or something. It was like like as cold as it can get. Yeah, that's probably the coldest I've ever been in my life. That was I remember I was like unnatural. Yeah, like horribly cold, like to your bones. Yeah, like you feel it in your bones. And I remember like it just got to the point. And it was like 4:30 or like 5 a.m. or something, and like me and Jake, another one of our mates, were just like, man, should we just like walk into town? We just like need to move. And I remember we just like walked into town, like deliberately just tried to walk, almost like power walk around town just to get some blood flowing. And then we just found these like heated vents outside like Splash, which was like a swimming pool in Bridgewater. And there was like heated vents out there at the back, and we just like sat by them and we were just like, and then I think by that point, like you then came and met us or something. Yeah, that was crazy. Get up and have a walkabout.
saying that I would have gone for the hot. I did watch this week The Revenant. Have either of you ever watched The Revenant?
Yeah, man, it's a
really
great
good,
movie.
right? Really
Leonardo
good.
DiCaprio and Tom Hardy.
But it did make me feel while watching that like in awe, but at the same time like fearful of nature, because it was so beautiful and so big.
The bears.
Even like the storms that they had to go through, and like when he has to cut open into like a horse. And just to survive the night. I remember looking at it and be like, I bet like. Well, I say I bet. It's pretty obvious that he would have been in pain, but that looks so horrible and miserable. I can't imagine many worse things.
Oh man, there's no doubt that some of those like frontiersmen in America and stuff were like hard men, and but as I said, you'd have to do some radical things sometimes to survive. And that's based on a true story as well. Did you know that?
Yeah,
the story of the Revenant. Yeah. So the guy that's Leonardo DiCaprio's character, there was a real guy, Hugh Glass. That's right, and he was attacked by a bear and stuff like that, and he did manage to survive. It's like brutal story.
He used to be a pirate as well. You know
was
that?
He?
That was
no,
cool.
I didn't know that.
Apparently, because I think what they took the real life inspiration from was actually like a fictional piece on him, but as a real person, he was like a pirate that was then abducted and taken in to be like a frontiersman or something, and then was abducted and taken into the Pawnee tribe.
Really?
And then like somehow he like gave them some sort of offering, and they just accepted him into their tribe. So he lived like a pretty crazy life, this guy. So
I think it's a bit the same as like the Vikings in terms of, or like the Last Kingdom in terms of, obviously it's based on reality, but obviously the movie itself is there's liberties. Anyway, we're gonna listen to a track now, but stick around, we will be back with you soon. This is Age of Aquarius by Villagers of Ionina City. Welcome back, everybody. You are now joining us in the second hour of Pandora's Box. That last track was I Saw the End by the great prog band Paul Bearer. Before that, we had Emotion Sickness by Silverchair, and before that, we had Age of Aquarius by Villagers of Ionina City. We hope that you're having a lovely, evening out there, whatever you're doing. During those last tracks, we were talking about dogs and bears and senses of smells, and also a little bit about working out. So let's just carry on. One of you were saying something.
I was about to say.
Right.
We were talking over the break about their sense of smell.
Right,
dogs' sense of smell. And I was just saying that I find it crazy that I never really see dogs react to something they're smelling. Like if you were to smell like some trash, like I'm talking about absolute
you're like,
trash, you're like, or if you smell something really good,
they almost like it.
But a dog is
I
like
did see a really funny, like one of those like real videos, and it was this dog. And it goes up to like its owner's work boot and like puts its head in it, and then comes out and goes.
I've seen a couple of things.
That was like real funny, just one.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos of like cats and dogs doing.
Have you seen that savage one as well of that woman who's like snoring in bed, and like and the guy like puts the sheet like over her head, and she's got her head like under the sheet, and she's just like full on sleeping but full on snoring, and he just gets a fan and like puts it at the end of the bed, and then like so it's kind of fanning into the the sheet, and then puts the dog in front, and the dog farts, and it just and she's got her head, and she literally just wakes up and goes, like, it's like imagine how disgusting that must be, just like placing in a dog
torture,
fart. Yeah, that was
dog farts are really bad, aren't
savage, full savage.
Sometimes when I eat meatballs, I have dog farts. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know, every now and again you do like a fart and it smells like dog food, and you're like, that's not good. But it is really fun torturing, your loved ones with them.
It is.
One thing I love about Evie is my daughter finds farts so funny, and obviously I do too. So whenever either one of us fart, we just laugh so much, and it's just a great thing to share with your child. Do you know what I mean?
It's one of those things, isn't it? Farts are just funny.
Yeah, they are funny. Yeah, they're like gross but funny. Yeah. Yeah, I love how we like devolved from sense of smell to just farts.
Yeah, that's the only way it can go, really.
Yeah, but
bad smells. Last week, I swear we talked about smell of death as well.
Yeah,
we did.
Really in-depthly.
Yeah, we were talking about why it's like not
the stench of death.
Why really like being like a police officer is almost like a bad job, because not only does sort of like everyone hate you, but then you have to deal with like really horrible stuff like finding dead bodies and But
then imagine being a police dog. And they have to smell that, but it's like 50 times the scent.
Yeah, but as you said, they almost like don't seem as bothered.
It is weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Like like dogs go mental for like fox scat and that, don't they?
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah, they go.
It excites them.
Yeah, and they like rub on it.
But it smells rank.
Why the hell would you rub on poop?
Yeah, like a couple of times a year, I'll find like fox scat in my garden, and it's not nice, man.
I suppose you've got to ask why we don't like those smells, and I guess the answer would be
because it's poo.
Yeah.
I suppose the answer would be because it's poo.
Do you reckon it is literally just your body's mechanism of like you eat the good stuff, you don't eat?
Well, I think it's because it's disease ridden. Like, it's very easy.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
like so your body's natural instinct and reaction to that is to know that it will be bad for you.
Yeah.
So it's going to smell bad, so you don't eat it, because things that smell good you want to eat. Have you ever seen like those chapsticks you can get that like smell like real like melon or like mango and stuff? And I smell them. I'm like, I just want to eat
Lick it.
I think I did that as a kid.
Yeah, I did as well.
I definitely did that a couple of times.
I bit off the top of a chapstick.
Or like cherry chapstick, and then after it you're like,
cherry chapstick. Exactly. You just want to eat it, don't you? If it smells good.
Or even like if you get like a bath bomb or something in Lush.
Yeah.
And it smells like too nice.
Yeah, you're like, how is that not edible?
Your brain's like, I know it's gonna be horrible if I bite it, but you just smell so good.
That's like something unnatural in it. Yeah. Normally, if things smell that good, you gotta eat them.
Straight up trickery, that is.
Like bread. Like fresh bread at the oven. Oh my god. Or coffee, like it's just freshly roasted. Oh
man, bathe in that juice. Yeah, but because I said, like, think if you had like a cut on your finger and then you like stuck your finger in poo, then that would like, there's a really good chance that would get like savagely infected, and then you'll probably have to cut your finger off to stop it like spreading.
Isn't it weird, like flies and stuff that are just that they
eat poo,
dung beetles and stuff.
And like that. By where we live, where I like park my motorbike round the side,
there's lots of poo flies.
Rupert came around there and like took a poop, and like I forgot to pick it up.
Yeah, Flymageddon.
We don't hardly go around there.
Poomageddon.
And like slow, and I keep forgetting. And like every time I go around there, it's just less and less and less, and now it's like gone. And it is literally like all the flies and stuff have just like consumed it, and it's just like it's weird and horrible, isn't it?
Gross,
like it's bad for us. Like it would actually give us disease and stuff. But flies and that, they like thrive off off it.
I actually asked that question on my breakfast show this morning because a fly came in the studio, and I said on the breakfast show, I was
BC
like,
fly.
what is the point in a fly?
Like,
is it another one of those animals that are just kind of about, like, they found their place in the food chain?
Every single animal, every single thing is a part of, like, the ecosystem. Yeah. So like, even if we don't realise,
but everything has to have a place. Yeah.
And it will. Like, you know, like, say, like the poop, like that. Like they just completely consume all that. If that just was there, just like.
And it's really dangerous, isn't it? It's like usually because of human meddling. But say if you took like a predator out of an environment, well then. Say like you took all the bears and the wolves out of like the national parks in North America. Well, then just deer and that are going to get out of control. Yeah. And then they're going to be going out onto the roads, and then there's going to be more altercations between humans, and then where stags like attack people and are like hitting cars in the road. And then all these other older male stags, because they're not getting eaten, are going to be like killing young stags. And so it's like causes a lot of issues.
Cause and effect. Yeah. And it's great. I remember
it's like keeping everything in check, isn't it? Balance.
Yeah. Nature is in perfect harmony.
Yeah, and it is in its own way with all of it. And I remember like one of the shows, it was like a David Attenborough, one of the most recent David Attenborough like kind of Earth shows. Yes. Like depicted it so well, where they went from like the krill that the blue whales eat, and like all of the
baleen
water going up
whales,
and then going over, and it was like an overwater river in the Andes Mountains and the rainforest and all that stuff, and just linked it all together. And like you know, it you would never think that and that have anything to do with each other, but they have like everything to do with each other.
Everything's linked. Yeah,
I think obviously exist without one another.
I think like humankind has obviously learnt that. Obviously over the centuries, well, even over the millennia, because it's like there's been times where we've accidentally introduced a species into an environment and then it's caused havoc, or there's been times where we've accidentally made a species extinct and then it's caused havoc. And I think it's like people don't realise how much damage it's going to cause. Like I know that I think we might have talked about this before, but like there's a massive cat problem in Australia because cats aren't native to Australia, and obviously where Australia's been its own continent and has been away from all the other, you know, nations and stuff for so long in our history, they've got a very unique ecosystem. Obviously, they've got really unique marsupials like kangaroos, and they've got like, you know, a very interesting ecosystem. And then the Europeans came over and they brought cats with them, and they thought, well, cats obviously are in Britain and stuff, and lots of other places like America. You know, what can it do? But because there were no cats or like ground-dwelling sort of predators in Australia, although
all the birds and stuff, and there was like ground-dwelling birds, weren't there?
Yeah, because if you think about it, even though there's savage predators in Australia like sharks, crocodiles, snakes, spiders and stuff, like the snakes and the crocodiles and the sharks, they're mostly in the water, or at least in the crocodile's case, they're near the banks. You know, they don't stray too far inland. Inland, there's this massive chunk of Australia which is just inland, where there aren't any sharks, obviously, there aren't any crocodiles. There are still probably snakes and spiders, but they're not the sort of thing that are going to like go on foot, like travel miles and miles and miles, just hunting and hunting and hunting and hunting. They usually have almost like a base. So that
I wonder why there was like never like lions and stuff, and like the kind of like the cat predators like you get in Africa, because it's like just as hot as Africa and stuff in some places.
I think obviously a lot of evolution is like by chance. So I think there would have been a time when, I'm not 100% sure, there might have been a time when there was a cat-like species in Australia, or there might have even been a time where Australia had already broken off before the cats had evolved, so they never spread there. Because I think cats originally evolved in Asia, and then ended up spreading throughout the rest of the world, and obviously because they were such successful creatures, now you can find them in most places. But all of it, the Australian ecosystem, ground nesting birds, obviously in Britain and stuff, most of the birds have evolved to be in trees away from the predators, because we have foxes and we have badgers and we have cats.
Used to have hogs.
Yeah, and wild boars as well, which would have definitely eaten them as well, would have eaten all the eggs and stuff. So we have quite a lot of predators in England that are ground hunters. So obviously the birds have evolved not to nest there. But in Australia, they just did. Millions of years of evolution. Oh, it's absolutely fine. It's safe here. Next thing you know, Europeans bring cats in, and cats just destroyed everything and just wrecked them. So I'm pretty sure that if you're it seems weird to us, because I think we think of hunting, and I always think of almost like a stereotypical like American hunter, like almost like, going and hunting some deer, or hunting like, maybe like a moose or something like that. But you can hunt deer in England as well if you get a license and that. And we even know someone that does, don't we? That Ollie, makes us, hunts some stags and does it all the right way, and he makes sausages and steaks and all sorts of stuff.
Venison burgers.
I used to work with your brother. Actually, still does work with your brother, actually. What was my point? Yes, but you don't... Yeah, so hunters in Australia, though, they are given... So governments usually sort out the hunting by like tags. So you're given like a certain amount of tags for each animal. So you can't hunt indiscriminately. The government will give you like a certain amount of tags for each animal. So every hunter, say... So like each hunter would be allowed, given, say, like 2 bear tags a year. And then you have to be like in an ethical way, like go for certain types of bears, like you not go for like the younger ones, you know, certain...
So are there bears in Australia?
No, but I'm talking about in America, say. I'm saying just like usually this is the way it is, but in Australia, I'm pretty sure that hunters are allowed an unlimited amount of tags for cats.
Emus too.
And emus. Oh yeah, because you said about the emu war, yeah. But like, yeah, so there's such a big cat problem that what we would consider domestic cats have obviously gone wild. They still look like domestic cats, but they're just wild in Australia.
That's cool.
And but I would hate to do that. I would hate to shoot a cat. But I know that obviously it's good for the ecosystem, but I would obviously just think of all the cats I've had.
Yeah.
There's been a couple like issues almost like that in England, haven't there? There was 2 things which spring to mind. I know one, is it in London where they introduced parrots? And then the parrots like escaped a zoo or something, and then they were like they thrived in that place. You can go to this certain part. I think it's in London.
That's
and
mad.
You can go to this certain part, and there's just like parrots everywhere, like all these different coloured parrots. And then another one, I know recently there was this guy on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think he's been persecuted for this, but he basically said that he was going to raise an army of frogs. That was his intention. So instead of all of the tadpoles and frog spawn all just dying like they normally would in nature's, grand scheme, this guy just like went and saved millions of frog spawn and tadpoles and like raised them up to evolve to become frogs and toads, and then they just like let loose on nature, and apparently they were just like everywhere, all over this place. And he got persecuted for literally like it's like terrorism on
terrorism. That's
nature.
crazy.
Yeah, nature.
Well, I
terrorism.
suppose imagine how bad you would feel though if you were the one that was responsible for like all that craziness, man.
I do remember there's this documentary about wild cats in Scotland as well, and it's really interesting.
They're beautiful cats, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not like our domesticated cats. They're actually their own species.
Lynxes and like
wild,
stuff like that.
Like they look like they look like a bit like the forest cats that you get in like Scandinavia and everything, and but now they've mated with like domestic cats.
Oh really?
And there's not any left in Scotland that are pure wild cats. They've all got like a slight bit of DNA of like domestic cat as well. But apparently all the domestic cats like go out into the forest and that because they know
of course.
They know the wild cats are going to be there.
Well, they say, didn't they, that even in like Britain, like pretty much everyone's like domestic cat wanders far more than you realise. You might think that your cat only goes like around, to the next door neighbour's garden.
Has a bit of a nightmare of it in Cannington. I always see on Facebook.
I see that.
Status is like, Flo hasn't been home. Luna hasn't been home for like 3 days now.
Yeah.
Can you please stop feeding her because she doesn't come home?
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were to inherit one particular characteristic, well, actually no, I'll change it. If you were to inherit all of the characteristics while remaining human of a particular animal, which animal would you choose? So it could be you choose a cheetah and you can run really fast. Maybe you're a bear and you've got like crazy strength. Yeah, maybe you're like a bird and you can fly.
Yeah, I'd be bear man.
Do you know what I thought was a cool option? A chameleon.
Chameleon man.
And you can like blend into your environment. Any environment.
That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be really cool.
Just never know where you are because you're just like up against that like purple soundboard, just like purple.
Exactly.
Playing pranks on us again.
I'd be the best at hide and seek.
You would be the best at hide and seek. But the thing is, it's like when you say like characteristics, like, so in what way would that manifest itself? Would I like look a little bit like a bear, or would I have like a little bit of like? Would I have like 10% of like all of the bear's abilities? Do you know what I mean? So would my sense of smell be like way better? I'll be stronger and almost like have claws a bit.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of like that.
Run really fast and
force. Like
that'd be freaky.
I'm picturing almost like a Marvel like interpretation of like you kind of get their characteristics, but you don't become a bear. You know what I mean?
I'd be Jaguar Man.
Yeah, that'd be sick, bro. Wear a bear and Jaguar Man.
I wear a bear and Jaguar Man.
Yeah, bear and jaguar, man. That'd be awesome. What I love, like, one of the most interesting things about, like, shamanism for me, though, as well, and, like, in animism, is, like, that's, like, when you see these, like, rituals of, like, shamanic cultures and everything in the tribes, like, that's what they're doing. They're, like, they're taking the energy of the animal and they're infusing it with their own, like, body and their own, like, in their dances. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to connect with the spirit of the animal, and then they think with that they become the animal, and they absorb the powers of that animal.
And in Native American sort of culture as well, and it's almost like because some animals are revered, and if you almost show certain traits, sometimes you'll be given like the name of a bear, or like a hawk, or like an eagle, or something like that, which is quite cool. Or like a snake, or just it could be anything, couldn't it? It could be anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was trying to find it because one thing I've been doing just while we've been talking about this. I was trying to find. I had a quickfire fact. I could have sworn I had a quickfire fact saved on my phone that basically was also going on about a guy in Australia who was a settler there, and for some reason he just really liked rabbits. So he took 15 rabbits with him to Australia, and apparently people were like, "Aren't you like worried about them breeding?" And this was before they had like the strict laws of today. I think this was like over 100 years ago or something. And he was like, "Oh, it's 15 rabbits. Like Australia is massive. What could be the problem?" And apparently, from those 15 rabbits, now there's something like over 1 billion rabbits in Australia, and they all link. They all link back to those 15 that guy brought over.
What the hell?
That is crazy. That's a cool fact.
I've been struggling to find it, but I know I had it. Like on my phone.
That's taking inbreeding to a new level.
Yeah. I guess luckily it was probably like just about enough. Like our rabbits, like 15 was maybe just about enough that it didn't.
None of those were related.
Yeah, because obviously if it was like 2, it probably would have like died from inbreeding. I don't know how much it is. I mean, I assume it's the same as humans. Like if you inbred animals, I expect they'd get all like weird and messed up like after a while.
I've been getting obsessed with like watching this thing on YouTube, and it's called the channel is called Soft White Underbelly.
Okay,
right. And like it's a bit of a cheeky, it's a bit of a cheeky title, isn't it? Yeah. But this guy literally interviews like the fringes of society, like in all different ways, like prostitutes and drug addicts and all that stuff.
That sounds quite cool.
But like he's visited this family called the Whitakers in somewhere in America. I can't remember the exact place, but they're like an inbred family,
right?
And like they were apparently, I think their parents were like first cousins or something, and like oh my god, like do you know when you're just like something's just so weird that you can't help watching it, like and it is literally like it's like
almost watching like a car crash, and you like turn your head as you're driving along.
Oh, like he just like interviews them and like goes and like the other ones are like proper interviews where he sits them down, but these Whitakers he just goes and like just videos them going around their day-to-day life, and it is just like, man, it's so messed up.
So what do they look weird?
Oh yeah.
Do they look really horrible?
Oh yeah, they look weird, all right.
So in what way? Does it look like Hills Have Eyes?
Eyes almost look like they're pointing to different ways, and they're all like, and this one guy just goes, Ray just goes, he just does that constantly.
Like I remember though there was like a couple of like kids in our year at school though, and I think like most years at school we have them, and like there's some kids that randomly look a bit inbred, and they might be from like the depths of Hamp, which is like one of the rougher states in the town we live in. Or like maybe like some proper like villager, like one of the little villages, like the one I live in, like around town. It's like they're nice places, but there's like some of the families back in those days.
There's a lot of cousins.
Yeah, before like cars were invented, you got to bear in mind that like. So I know this for a fact.
Get your entertainment in somehow.
Yeah, so my grandmother told me that like when she was a little girl, there would be a horse and cart would go into Bridgewater once a week, and as long as there was room on the cart, you could like hop on the back of the cart, and it would go into Bridgewater, and you could go around the market in Bridgewater and then come home. But that was like a big event. Yeah. Like Bridgewater from Stagursey is 8 miles.
Something so quaint about that.
So
as well.
An 8-mile trip. And this is just my grandmother's lifetime. So my grandmother's like in her early 80s, like early to mid 80s. So it's not like it was like hundreds of years ago, man. You know what I mean? But it's like at the time, apparently there was one car in the village. That was the doctor's car, right? And so like an 8-mile, 60-mile round trip was like a big event. That was like a once a week big event, and you wouldn't even necessarily do it once a week. And so yeah, you got to think the world was a lot bigger back then. So like if somebody like in a neighbouring village that was even like 3 miles away, that was like almost considered like a different society almost to you. Because the world was a lot bigger. You got to bear in mind, it's like TVs had only just been invented. Maybe only like there were maybe like 3 TVs in the village. So, you'd only hear like stuff on radio, and everyone would have worked actually in the village. There would have been no like commuting miles to work. You would have just worked in the village. You know, there would have been like a baker and a butcher and builders and all. You know, it would all been local
communities.
Yeah, but it's like obviously as a result, you know, if you've got a village and it's only like, say, I don't know, 400 people in the village. Yeah, as you said, as time goes on, you got a lot of cousins, man. A lot of people are related. You know, there's just a couple of people I can think of in my mind, like, and you know, maybe they just had like weird proportions on their face. You know, maybe like one eye was a bit up, like on their forehead, and the other one was sort of on their cheek, or like, you know, they just had like a weirdly narrow, narrow jaw, but then like a weirdly big, like forehead, and then like big ears and that, and it's just like, you know, something just looks a bit off, and it's like, I reckon there's a bit of inbreeding going on there. And it's like Tutankhamun, you know, because we have his remains.
Yeah, I remember you saying about this, and this blew my mind.
Yeah, like, so like obviously there's a bit like the Targaryen family in Game of Thrones. I think that's what it's based on, probably. But yeah, the Egyptians were like big on inbreeding because
carrying the bloodlines on.
Yeah, they used to think of it as almost like you're carrying on a pure bloodline. So it's like, you know, we have the elite genes, we are the emperors and everything like that, and the queen
chosen by the gods.
Yeah, so it's like you don't want to mate with some randomer, but really that's the best thing you can do. You know, and but yeah, and as a result, like Tutankhamun,
Mongols are the healthiest dogs.
Yeah. And as a result, like Tutankhamun, they know had like hideous physical disabilities, and he would have lived his whole entire life in pain. He had like savage rheumatoid arthritis, like a list full of medical conditions that he was born with, like weird physical proportions. Apparently he had like massive hips and then like weirdly narrow shoulders and that, like almost like the exact opposite of what you'd want to be like as a bloke. Do you know what I mean? Like small and weak and feeble and always ill.
I don't like wearing hip pads in my motorbike trousers because it looks just so weird and it feels so weird. I'm like, nah, it's not right.
Giving you a big ass.
Isn't there like still like a massive thing with all of like the royal families of like the world, basically? You can
of Europe.
Of Europe, there's quite a lot of like bloodlines that are linked all across that.
Yeah,
like, they would try and keep it, even if it was like across countries and that, they would still try and marry royalty.
Oh, 100%.
Like, the bloodlines pure. In
obviously,
that way.
we are one of the last monarchies left in Europe. Obviously, like Spain doesn't have a monarchy anymore. Italy doesn't. France doesn't. But I think that I'm just trying to think. I feel like I should know this. Some countries do still. Like I think that maybe like Denmark and a couple of other Scandi countries might still have a monarchy. Obviously, a bit like ours, it's like more of a token than anything. Like they don't, you know, they still have governments, obviously, which are like rule of the land. That, you know, but. So like all of those families, would have been, you know, they would have all been cousins. We've talked about it before, haven't we? About how like King George, you know, during you know, the First World War, it would have been like they were all cousins. So like the, you know, the heads of state of Russia and Germany and everything.
Find it really
we're all cousins, and you can see photos of them all in black and white, and they basically the same. It's weird. It's weird how similar they all look. Just like slightly different styles of like mustache depending on what was popular in like Russia compared to Britain. You know, Britain's was more like bushy and like that, and then the Russians might have been like a bit different. I don't know.
I found it really fascinating. Was it a couple of weeks ago you said a quickfire fact on like certain points where the world only had like a couple humans or
because of mass
we've
extinction
then descended from.
And
I find that really fascinating,
like
how
the rabbits.
how they managed to like avoid inbreeding within restarting the world from that.
Yeah, as I said, a bit like with those 15 rabbits, I guess
it's you
need just about enough for it not to become, you know, for everyone to become too mental.
I mean, I suppose when you look at like I was going to say species of people then.
Well,
like,
sort of.
Kind of, yeah. Like
different types of people. There are different types of people.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
there's nothing wrong with that. We're all people.
It's to do with, like where they were from and the stock of humans that were there in that time.
Yeah, like a Samoan. A Samoan looks different than a Chinese person.
But
a Chinese
similar,
person
like you say, like similar enough, but like different enough to not be like to not let it genetically affect you.
Yeah. We've almost like everyone's evolved regarding on your ancestors. You've evolved to whatever your climate is. You know, if you live in a really snowy, cold country, you're gonna have paler skin. You know, if you live, like Samoans, they like, you know, have very interesting. You know, like they have their own look. You know, and obviously, Indians have their own look. You know, Chinese people have their own look, and we're all human in terms of like our DNA and that we're like identical and stuff, but we do have slightly different physical attributes and traits depending on where you evolved from. That's just quite cool, though, isn't it? It's no different with like cats or, there's different. There's things that fall under the same genus, but they look slightly different because of where they've evolved to live, like what habitat. So it's like in snowy climates you have like Arctic foxes, which are white. In Britain, different colour, but you can see why it's evolved to be white.
One of the coolest animals, by the way. Anything like a white Arctic
or like a polar bear,
is so cool.
Yeah, you see like polar bears and Arctic foxes. They've evolved to be white because they live in the snow. So, but if you go back far enough, they would have had a common ancestor with like a brown bear or like a more traditional European fox, which is just the red one that I'm thinking of.
I always find it so interesting, like how completely different like a species is, like in looks.
I loved how you said completely, by the way. Then you were like completely. Like you were like this professor of like
I just think of like a cheetah in my head and just like its spots and everything, and then like a brown bear and just like how we're all kind of
or even
the
like
same water shrew,
or even like our common ancestor, the water shrew. Or even like if you want to use the cheetah analogy, even think like in Africa, like a cheetah's come from Africa, but even think on that continent, there's other big cats. Like lions, so like you've got multiple.
But so different. Yeah.
So lions have evolved to almost be like powerhouses, and then the cheetahs are like the complete opposite.
Speed houses.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. They're not by any means the strongest cat. They're not even in the top 5, but they're the fastest animal on the planet.
Yeah.
What was it? They can run like 70 miles an hour or something.
It's something ridiculous.
I'm pretty sure it's 70 miles an hour, which is like 100 kilometers per hour. That's crazy. To think that an animal could pass you on the M5. Yeah. Like potentially. Do you know what I mean? It's like mad. That is mad. But so even on the same continent, it's cool that you see things like because you've got leopards, cheetahs, and lions all in Africa. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
but it's like how it separates them enough. Like it's something that my mind just can't get. Can't get its own mind around. My mind can't get my mind around this about like how it can be, but it's just because we haven't gone back far enough in what we can see, like in evolution. But something spiked so different to make it look so completely different, like And now we're just seeing
but it's a bit like
the outcome of
the result. Yeah.
Do you remember we were talking about killer whales ages ago, and we were saying about how one thing that scientists have observed, marine biologists and stuff, by observing killer whales, that we can see that killer whales are in the midst of evolution, and how we're seeing what we think of as a killer whale. There are basically 2 separate species that are evolving out of what we now see as killer whales. So you see that there's some killer whales that are almost getting even bigger and more aggressive, but having smaller packs. And we call them what's the word?
Super killer whales.
I know that the nickname for them, like the slang term, people call them wolf packs, but there's a more scientific name. And then you've got the more like basically fishing packs, which tend to be larger, up to 50 members. But they stick they usually stick to the same area of the ocean. So they don't travel around the world. They stick to the same area of the ocean, and say they just specialize in hunting fish. So you're seeing this we're seeing evolution playing out. There are pods as low as 3 pods of these like wolf packs, as I called them, but as I said, there is a scientific name, I just can't remember what it is, but there are some pods as small as I said 3 of these like battle-hardened, massive killer whales that tend to be much more aggressive, covered in scars because they hunt things like great white sharks for their livers. They're the ones that are hunting like massive walruses and stuff, and have to like deal with them getting stabbed by the tusks and all stuff like that. Sea lions, which are actually quite vicious predators. I don't think people realise how big and vicious like a sea lion can be. But they hunt like the most terrifying predators in the ocean, so they're covered in scars, and they even speak a different language. So like marine biologists have like studied their speech enough to realise that like the ones that are like in these smaller pods and are like hunting things like great white sharks are speaking a different language to the ones that are like staying near the coast and in like more familial pods.
That's so
larger
cool.
pods that are like hunting small fish. So it's like you can see that there's one of them. It's almost like they're evolving to become almost like more docile, more friendly, more in like a family orientated pod. And then you see these other ones which are getting more aggressive, probably even more beneficial to be bigger and more cunning and almost like more savage. And it's like in like a million years they'll probably not even look alike. Whereas at the moment they pretty much look alike. It's just that the ones that are staying by the coast are starting to be, maybe on average, the average killer whale might be 26 foot long, whereas the average one that's in a wolf pack might be 32 feet long. But eventually they might go 20 foot long, and the ones that might go 35 feet long. So it's, in like a million years, as I said, there'll be such a drastic change that you'll be like, okay, this is clearly two different species. But I say you've got to bear in mind that like a killer whale, even though it's called a killer whale, was essentially just a species of dolphin. So there would have almost been like a time when I guess there would have been a common ancestor between an orca or a killer whale and say a bottlenose dolphin, where they would have been the same creature. So it's no different than that.
And then it would have been like you say, the more aggressive ones and the more like big ones that would have probably split off and then evolved to be the killer whale. That's so cool.
I think killer whales are like one of the most fascinating.
It's interesting to think like what we could evolve into, but it's quite scary when you think of like the more technological things are getting and how like we're becoming less physical in the new
more
kind of age,
dependent on tech.
Yeah, so I'm just like, our minds, like what we could create and invent and everything. It's like beyond, but like
it's like when we were saying about King Henry VIII's archers, and each one of their bows was like
double the size of
and each one of their, like, I think it's like, nowadays if you like go to the gym and you think regularly, say like I do, and I'm like a pretty strong guy, but still, like, I have a 60-pound bow, and it's like it's easy for me to use, don't get me wrong, but then the fact that I think, what was it, 120-pound draw strength for every single one of King
double
Henry's,
the strength of your 60-pound bow.
And you think, and then I'm like, it almost like humbles me a little bit in terms of like, I almost naturally think that if I went back in time, because they didn't have that knowledge of exercise and that science behind it, that maybe they would think I was really strong. But actually, I don't think they would be that impressed at all. Like, and it's not that I don't think that I don't think they would find me unimpressive, but I just don't think that they would think anything of it. There would be people out there that were just like stronger still, the same way that there are people stronger than me today.
They would have like weirdly like massive one arms.
Yeah, we see it with height as well now, don't we? Obviously, if you think like how much taller the general population has got over the last 100 years or so, like that's a clear example of humans evolving.
Well, I mean, I think you can see there's good evidence in, say, people like the Japanese. Apparently, since the Japanese have adopted a lot of the European diet, they've gotten really tall. Apparently, in Japanese culture, before they started sort of having much to do with Europeans, they didn't eat beef, and they didn't eat much protein in their diet. And as a result, the average height of the male Japanese man was like 5'4" or something. Now it's really popular and common in Japanese cuisine to eat lots of beef, and they love steak. Like, you can go to like a Japanese anybody that's been to a Japanese restaurant knows this.
Well, some of the
have like
best
steak
beef
and
comes
rice
from Japan. It's Wagyu,
and it's like, I've been to a real nice steakhouse in Western-super-Mare, and I remember I just had a really nice steak and rice. And apparently since then, their average height of like a man has gone from like 5'4" to like near 6 foot. So like Japanese people are now like pretty much just as tall as European people.
Wow.
But like 100 years ago, they were like 5'4".
So we talk about these things happening like so long over time, but then
some things can happen very quick.
Yeah. It's like how adaptable your body is just to certain things, like playing guitar, all that kind of stuff. You get these hard calluses on your fingers.
Well, I remember reading as well, and this is, as I said, because as you just said, evolution can take millions of years, but also you can do certain things to speed up the process. So I remember reading, I remember thinking it was really cool because I was thinking about my own daughter, and I almost asked my old man questions about me and my brother as well. Did you know that if a man and a woman are both working out when they conceive a child, the child will be more athletic and stronger when it's fully formed than if their mother and father were not working out at the time of contraception? Don't you think that's freaking mental?
That's so cool.
Don't you think that's really cool though? Like, that almost seems mental to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you can make your offspring a better athlete and physically like stronger and faster and more powerful and everything, just by working out around the time that you conceive the child. That is
I bet
cool.
you're chuffed then, because that was definitely the case for both of you, wasn't it?
100%. Yeah, like really hard as well. We were like balls deep in training, both of us at the time, like both of us. So like I don't obviously mind if she's not, but I sort of expect that Evie's going to be a very athletic girl when she's fully grown. And I asked my old man actually, just out of interest, if what his training was like around the time that he would have conceived me and my brother, and I think he did say actually that he was almost like taking I can't remember why, but almost like more of a break when my brother was conceived. And my brother's very strong, don't get me wrong, but he's not as like overall athletic as me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm quite a good jack of all trades, so So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
That doesn't surprise me too much because I think of like footballers and stuff, and you find these footballing families like Maldini, for example, is a good example.
Or in pro wrestling families,
and
exactly.
There's all these families that
On
the
boxers.
best people in the world. You look back and you go, oh, they're related to someone that used to be one of the best in the world.
It's almost become like inserted in your genetic code.
Yeah.
It's like if one member does it enough, it's like inserted in your genetic code. It's almost like Assassin's Creed in that regard. And then it's like that becomes a part of your DNA code. So it's like it gives your offspring and maybe your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, potentially, not necessarily, but the potential that a certain one of them might be able to unlock that code, like unlock that potential because it's like stored in you from your great grandfather or something. You know?
I almost thought
That's
it was
cool.
because of like, I almost thought the reason for that was because of like a passion, and they would have just been brought up
Inherited
around football,
the passion,
whatever.
yeah.
But that's so cool that they would have actually inherited like genetic skills from their ancestors.
And you can see it like obviously like you know, say families of farmers even. You know, if you've like your family have been like farmers for like as far back as your lineage goes, as far as you're aware, then you know they call it, don't they? They call it like farm boy strength, and like you see people like Brock Lesnar or like, you know, I know some like people that have like got farmers in their lots of farmers in their families as well, and like they tend to be quite strong people because obviously their jobs are like lifting hay bales and, you know, like wrangling sheep and walking around with like buckets full of milk in each hand, and you know, it's like it's a physically hard way of life, whereas people that might have solicitors in their family for as far back as the eye can see, they're probably going to be more likely to be mentally impressive, but they might be physically quite unimpressive, you know? So it's like, yeah, it's fascinating. I think it's really fascinating. So cool.
Yeah.
But do lots of push-ups if you're planning on having a kid and you might have a freak athlete.
Do you reckon it's both ways as well? Do you reckon it's physically, but also... say people are like super successful or like super academic and things like that. Do you reckon that would be passed down in a kind of a genetic way as well?
What do you mean, like if you were... Well,
I think of like super successful like families and stuff, and people that have achieved like really great things. Not say it could be physically, but also like within business or within like academically, like whether that would that kind of... Because it's almost like strength of mind, isn't it? When you can commit to something and that is almost training your brain muscle. So whether that would come through.
I think it's hard to judge because obviously that would be worked upon as you're growing up, and that would be where the main, like, if you were growing up, maybe going to like the best school that you could possibly go to, being surrounded by peers that were like, you know, really good at this stuff as well, then that's obviously going to progress you further.
This whole nature or nurture thing, because obviously nurture is going to be the most important thing for that, or in both. But is there latent things that you could unlock that would make you like?
It's probably harder to monitor because I think it's easy to see like a freak athlete. If you see like a Brock Lesnar who's like a guy that's like 280 pounds, but he's like faster than most 180 pound guys.
Yeah, it's a very physical thing.
And you're like, this guy is a freak athlete. He's like as strong as a powerlifter, but he's as fast as a, I don't know, like a soccer player. Do you know what I mean? It's like this guy's almost like scary. He like moves like a cat, but he looks like a gorilla. Like, whereas. As I said, with that mental thing, it's harder to gauge that, isn't it? And it's like almost like, you know, I was saying like there's literally scientific evidence that shows that if you're working out at the time your child's conceived, that they're going to be physically stronger and fitter and faster. Well, it's like, how would you do that mentally? Like, if I'm reading lots of books,
I'm talking about like personality and stuff. So like, you can definitely see the personality of some people's like mothers and fathers in their offspring.
100%.
So that's a very like, that's
I can
almost
see,
like
I know you well enough, and I know your family well enough to see what you've got from your mum and what you've got from your dad.
Yeah.
I can almost decode that, and I'm sure you can do that with me a little bit as well.
Yeah,
if you
so
think
I
about
think
it.
some of that stuff is like it within like the way that their brains are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It absolutely wouldn't surprise me if your like theory would be correct. That they would inherit like
I don't think it's
being a bit smarter.
But I think as well, it's, as I said, I think one of the reasons why it's hard to gauge is because it's like with the mental way, it's much easier to do the nurture in terms of like, it makes obviously perfect sense that if you grow a child up around two people that are very academically intelligent, they are just going to absorb a lot more knowledge than say two people whose parents are not so academic, right? Whereas to physically be nurtured, you'd almost like have to be brought up physically training the same way that say like they would in Spartan culture. So it's so, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's in that regard, it's like it's a bit different. All you need to do to be smarter is hang around with smart people, and you're going to find out stuff. As I said, whereas to be more of an athlete, you'd have to almost be put through a training program from a young age, like the Spartans did. So it's but it's cool. It's really cool to think about, isn't it?
And like
really
you say as well, how do you measure someone's intelligence? Because you can be intelligent in one way and
but I mean, there's IQ scores,
another.
and obviously, you know. So I do agree with you.
There's also like
but there's
emotional
general intelligence
as well. You know, like
it's
being balanced between both. Like you get a lot of people that are like super intelligent that have like no social skills and like kind of like
definitely
find communication really hard and stuff like that. I think if you've got a good mixture of both, you're gonna do well.
Well, I think most decent philosophers, whether it's Jordan Peterson today or like Socrates all the way back in the day, they would say things like, you know, you, regardless of who you are, you can learn something from like everyone on the planet, right? So I think you should be humble in that regard. You know, so like the most academic of people could learn something from the most humble of bricklayers. So you shouldn't ever have like a know-it-all attitude. You should be very open in terms of like, I could potentially learn something from everybody on the planet. Where was I going to go with that? I'm literally having a brain fart now. My brain's certainly not working. But so I think you should have like that attitude. So like all the wisest philosophers do know that, obviously. So I think it's good to have an open mind in that regard. But obviously, even though you might be open-minded, there's still clearly some people, obviously, that are, you know, much more intelligent than other people. You know, that's like ability to retain information. And just said, there's like, you know, some people's like recall. You know, I think recall to me is one of the most impressive forms of like what makes somebody intelligent. So just the ability to recall lots of information quickly. And then when you're around people that are like, I've got mad recall, it's like, you're like, whoa.
But that's what I mean. Sometimes I think that's kind of like inherited or something, because like you put two people in the same class or in the same room. I know they have different upbringings, but I think sometimes people just do have genuinely scary like ability to just like remember and recall stuff. And I'm like, how the hell is it possible for your brain to do that?
Yeah,
you know
100%.
what I mean? And
or the
like,
same way that like some kids, especially like some autistic kids and stuff, have like mad mathematical skills.
Yeah.
They're just like, what's 275 times 3,540? And they're like, and you're like, whoa.
It's wired in a different way.
Before you could even get your calculator out.
You know,
it's like, man.
Trying to count it on my hand.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I did yesterday. Someone asked me, that's one of the worst questions coming out, someone to ask me. Oh, what you been up to then? No?
Literally.
Oh, God.
That's
the worst question from your face.
I'm always like, I don't know.
What have I been doing?
Don't ask me that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, one of the worst things.
Ask me what I think about something. Or
Yeah,
like,
you know.
Yeah, didn't ask me what I was doing yesterday.
We're definitely similar in that regard, man. Yeah. Definitely would rather be asked what I think about something than what I did yesterday. What did you do at the weekend? I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
No, I did something.
Yeah. Definitely happened.
I can assure you I was there somewhere.
I was breathing somewhere, as is evidenced by my current.
I'm sure there was some food and it was nice.
Yeah.
I didn't let myself eat not nice things.
Yeah. Crazy.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Just going back on a couple of things just to end, and obviously it applies to you as well, Drew. I always like joked to my grandmother, because she was from Stagursey, as I said, one of these little villages. Obviously, my grandfather, like your grandfather, is from a completely different area of the world to my grandmother. So I always joke like, it's a good thing you got with Granddad, because that was like fully, like that fresh blood was needed. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I think she's like some little like Stagursey girl, and then she meets my grandfather, who's like, you know, a Manxman. He's like so far up north, and then like he had like, I think his grandmother was Irish, and you know, so it's like so much like of a good influx of blood. And the same with your grand, obviously being Scottish, and then your grandmother was Maltese, and then
or a mixture between Maltese and Brummie.
So
her dad was Brummie and her mum was Maltese. But
a real nice mixture of genes, you know.
After doing my ancestry DNA thing, I'm worried about my genes.
You're a bit inbred.
90% English. That's not looking good, is it?
No, I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. But as I said, the good thing about...
It's a mixture in itself, England.
Yeah, I was going to say, the good thing about being English is, talking about mongrels earlier on, if you are English or British, you naturally are going to be mongrels, because, I mean, I know, like, I have I have Scottish blood, I have Irish blood, I have Norwegian blood, I must have somewhere along the line some ancient Brythonic blood, it's like ancient Britons, like we were talking about earlier with Boudica. I must have some of that in me, but I obviously must have some Anglo-Saxon DNA as well, which is like from modern day Netherlands, Northern Germany and Denmark. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, even if you are just English, you already probably have about 7 different races in you. And also leftover Romans, because not all the Romans left. The Roman military pulled out, but there would have been Romano-British people that stayed, which would have ended up pretty much getting assimilated into the Anglo-Saxon culture. So we've probably all got Roman in us as well. And on that, we shall finish yet another Pandora's box.
Time to end.
Thank you, everybody, for relaxing with us this evening. We love you all. And we shall see you next week on Pandora's Box. Farewell, everybody.
Goodbye.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye.